Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Ashley. On behalf of the Pima County 5G Awareness Coalition, I want to welcome you to this public forum. For those of you just arriving, we have some light refreshments in the back. So help yourself and then take a seat. So we are a small citizens group that was formed here in Tucson, and we organized today's event called the 5th Generation of Wireless Technology, Technical Revolution, or Pandora's Box. Because we have some very serious concerns about what 5G technology is going to be bringing. Now, while this seems like a really, truly transformative technology that is going to bring us greater connectivity and speed for our smartphones and for streaming our devices, we also are very aware that 5G is going to be bringing us a whole lot more. So we formed this event today, and we brought in some nationally recognized experts to help us learn more what 5G is all about. This is a very, very, very complex societal issue, and it is our hope that today and as the days go by, that we gain more awareness and education so we can understand and be equipped with the tools that we need to address our concerns. I got into this because I am a concerned mom, and I live on this beautiful planet. When I was about 8 years old, I was severely electrocuted, and I am very electromagnetically sensitive, which basically means that I can walk into a building and I can feel it all. I can feel the Wi-Fi. I can feel when I pick up my phone. I get heart palpitations. I have a lot of anxiety, so it impacts me a lot. And so when I learned about 5G, and I was like, wow, they're really going to be deploying this, I first thought about my own health, as well as the health of my children, as well as the health of pregnant women, and especially our elders and those with chronic illness and disease or autoimmune issues, who are the vulnerable populations. So me and a couple friends got together and we started to form this group, and here we are today. And now I want to introduce Elizabeth Kelly, who is the moderator of our program. Elizabeth is the executive director of the Electromagnetic Safety Alliance. She has a public policy background and worked for the Department of Health and Human Services. And she has been advocating for protection from all sources of non-ionizing radiation for over 2 decades. And on a personal note, Libby is the anchor to this group, and I have so much admiration and love and respect for all that she does. And I just want to welcome her and give her a lot of love. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ashley, and hello, everybody. Welcome to our forum. I would like to, before I begin my portion of the program, I'd like to make a couple of announcements. First of all, if you have a cell phone, is it on? Would you please either turn it off or put it on airport settings? I think we all would be much more comfortable in the room if we were not sitting with competing signals around us. After all, that is the subject of our forum. The other thing is that if you are a little bit sensitive to electromagnetic fields, just be aware that there's some equipment over there on the east side of the room, up in the front here, that is putting out a little bit of radio frequency radiation because it is transmitting. And so you may feel more comfortable sitting on the other side of the room, maybe even a little further back. You might feel more comfortable there. And if you're having trouble seeing the slides, because then you'll see them, how clear our slides would be towards the back of the room. The program is going to go like this. Between now and roughly 3:30, we're going to be presenting a series of lectures by our speakers, including myself. Then we'll take a little break, and we'll start again 10 minutes later, and we're going to have a question and answer period. This program is being live streamed, so conceivably people are able to watch this from all over the world. And I hope you are, and I welcome you if you are. What we have to talk about has global implications, so it is useful to hear what various communities are doing, like we are doing, to raise awareness. So We're going to be using a system of 3x5 cards for questions and answers so that everybody will hear the question, and then it'll all be recorded, and the people that aren't in the room will be able to understand the question as well, so it'll make things go a little more smoothly. So I think that's at the end of my opening remarks, and I'll just begin with what I was planning to talk about. As Ashley said, we are starting a public dialogue in Tucson, Pima County in general, about what most people refer to as 5G, fifth generation wireless and the Internet of Things. Technology is evolving, and as it does, it is transforming society and us and the way we communicate. So we're here to look into Pandora's box, see what's in there, what the implications are, what are the risks, what are the benefits, and are there any alternative options to fifth generation wireless? My second slide, I can change this myself. What, Taylor? Oh, thank you. I'm so glad Taylor's here. The second slide is just illustrating what fourth generation antennas look like around town and what fifth generation antenna infrastructure, that is, will look like when it is in town. To our knowledge, there is no fifth generation wireless infrastructure antennas, or there are no infrastructure antennas in Tucson yet. But these are going in all over the country, and we are hearing stories of people who are waking up to find them in their front yards and are going to speak with their public officials about it, asking for relief. It's coming as a kind of a surprise, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But the tower on the left is well known to all of us. These are saguaro cacti, icons of our area, and they're also homes for cellular antennas. But those are third and fourth G generation antennas. The photo down at the bottom is a 5G antenna, not taken from here, but it shows what they look like up close. They're a small square box, kind of the size of a large handbag, and they're often posted on poles by themselves or on power poles. And then on the right is a conceptual framework or design for what the infrastructure will look like, focusing on the beam-forming capability of 5G. Fifth generation wireless has a completely different type of signaling system, different frequencies, different power levels, and has capabilities that the earlier generations did not have. And one of them is beam-forming, where a beam can be focused to the distance to a smart car, a smart phone, a smart office, smart home, and it can transmit almost instantaneously because built into that beam are a lot of antennas, and built into the receptors in the homes and for phones and cars and offices are several antennas. So this is the reason why they can claim that everything's going to be a lot faster, because they are building a system that will transmit a lot of data very quickly. So that beam is going to be used almost instantaneously, transmit a whole lot of data. So those of you who like to do video downloads, if you're a customer, you'll be receiving signal, your video for the evening right away. But don't get between that beam and the antenna and where it's going, okay, because it could be harmful. Next slide, please. Speed and connectivity will increase due to antenna densification around town. This is the plan. They intend to install roughly 1 million more antennas in the United States for fifth generation wireless. There are now about 250,000 towers that some have multiple antennas. So what are going up now will be 1 million more towers that will have one or more antennas. These are not individual antennas necessarily. 5G phones will be on the market by next summer. And the telecom industry plans to be in charge of a national 5G infrastructure that may look like this. This is another schematic. I won't go into all the details, but in the back left you see a very, very tall tower called a macro cell. and it contains a whole lot of antennas, and it's called multiple input, multiple output. That large tower is capable of beaming a lot of data directly to particular sources on demand. And it will connect with fixed wireless antennas on buildings and then connect to small cell antennas nearby the buildings, very close in some cases. And it can connect to the smart cars and the smartphones. And so this is what it would look like. It would also be connecting along the street. Literally everything will be connected if this plan goes through. Down in the far right corner is a little black box with the word fiber over it. The fiber means that this little black box is the link to the fiber wired backhaul that the wireless industry still uses to support their wireless infrastructures. We'll be hearing later from Dr. Tim Sheckley about the benefits of municipal fiber optic networks to the premises. This is really an alternative option. Using that fiber, and we have about 500 miles of fiber underneath the ground in this town, building on that fiber and perhaps envisioning something else than totally 5G wireless everywhere. Instead, we would have a fiber optic system to the premises. This is very quickly, I'm going to show you the vision that the designers of the Internet of Things would like us to know about for the future. I said earlier, everything will be connected to everything. The designers of this conceptual framework envision sensors and many microtransmitters that are attached to literally everything we can see in our lives that we do, objects all over the place, like plant water, drugs, our shoes, food, all kinds of appliances, you name it. As this builds out, that's the end game. That's what is being envisioned. So I got this out of one of the federal national reports that describe the plan, the vision for this cyber physical framework that the National Institute of Science and Technology has come up with. I want to read a quote here from Dr. Anthony Chan, who's the CEO of Huawei Technologies. They have a plant in Texas. It's a Chinese company based in the United States, and they manufacture cell phones. And Dr. Hui was overheard talking at a conference a year or so ago where he indicated really what the driver is for the manufacturers of cell phones. And he said, if the technology does not change, the company will die. It is more about jobs, engineering, and manufacturing. People need to buy a new cell phone. Okay? The chief concerns that citizens have about fifth generation are the following. Real property devaluation. How would you feel if you suddenly woke up one day and there was a low tower up to 50 feet tall in your front yard in the right-of-way access, the utility access, and you were told that they didn't have to tell you about it, and it's there, and it's not going to come down. And you know that there's an antenna on top of that tower that's going to be radiating into your home. Now, clearly, if you're a customer, you want wireless services for telephone, internet, and television, this is great. But for some people, it may be cause for great concern. So it's a kind of a double-edged sword here. Some people may then want to shield their home. Eric Windheim is here today as a building biologist, and he'll be describing what people can do if they're concerned about shielding themselves and what their personal practices might be should they find themselves being exposed to fifth-generation wireless. The threats to health and well-being. The threats to health are well established, but it's been very difficult to get the point across with our federal agencies, the FCC, the Congress. I have been working with people for over 2 decades to bring the health concerns that people have, which are science-based, to decision makers to repeal Section 704 of the Federal Telecommunications Act, which was passed in 1996 and prohibited states from denying a permit for site a cell antenna based on health concerns. That's what drew me into this issue in the first place. I thought, what? Why would they do that? What's the point? What are they hiding? Well, we're still in that position, looking at this issue saying, what is going on? So that preemption is already there. And then on top of them, we're going to have some more preemptions that the FCC just placed into federal law just very recently. Well, to continue about citizens' concerns, they're concerned about their public safety. Where are these antennas going to go? Where is the equipment case box going to go? Is it going to be in an area where people are gardening or their children play? Are they going to fall over it? Is that going to fall? Is it going to hit my building? Are they going to have to cut down trees? We don't know. Loss of privacy, another huge issue, which I'm not going to go into today, but if you have paid attention to what's going on with Google and Facebook, you're getting a hint about all the unresolved privacy issues that we're facing as citizens in this country that are not being adequately addressed for our protection. Threats to security, even national security. There again, wireless systems are easy to hack into. They are being hacked into. We know it, and yet we don't seem to be able to get on top of it. Finally, there was a law in Arizona that passed in April 2017 that was a model legislation proposed by ALEC. ALEC is the American Legislative Exchange Commission, I believe it's called, and they write model laws. It's a conservative group. Arizona was the first state to pass that law, and it welcomes accelerated fifth 5G wireless into Arizona. Only 20 states have done this. And that law provides that there would be no zoning review or approval needed for a 5G antenna, so just so long it was as it was a co-located site and the tower was not taller than 50 feet. So if the wireless carriers get together and come forward with a plan for co-locating on the same pole, that will happen, and you will not be notified. It'll just happen. That's something we need to think about changing. The National Toxicology Program just completed a report and issued a final report that was requested by the Food and Drug Administration in 1999. At that time, FDA said, you know, there's 80 million people in the U.S. using a cell phone. Is this a safe technology? So NTP undertook a very large animal study. It cost about $25 million. But it was really strange that the study took so many years to complete. Now, I wonder why that happened. So here we are today. We finally have the final report. And guess what? It reports there's clear evidence of cancer. Heart cancer, some evidence of glioblastoma. These are, and some adrenal cancer, and a whole lot of questions about other cancers, plus hyperplasias that could later on become cancers. So there's a lot of evidence here. This was a long-term study of rats, and for sure, rats should not use a cell phone. We know that for sure. But what we don't know is, how about people? How does this affect human health? So the next step, which is usually taken, is the Food and Drug Administration does a health assessment of a report. They always do when NTP does animal studies, and they make a determination about the human health effects, the likelihood there's harm, and then issue health advisories. Well, strangely enough, that's not happening right now. But when you consider that FDA is a captured agency, it's understandable. This means that we're not being protected. We're already not being protected because the FCC human exposure guidelines for radio frequency radiation are obsolete. They're based on old science. They're inadequate. They only protect us against short-term exposure, not chronic exposure, one frequency at a time, not all the frequencies we're being exposed to. And finally, they're only protecting us against thermal heat or burn, whereby we might go into shock or have a burn on our bodies. It's entirely different than the exposure conditions we are receiving from these low ubiquitous frequencies that are permeating our lives every day. So it's an experiment, a massive human experiment, and we're the subjects of it. And we can't look to our government to look after us on this. When asked about this report, FDA said, well, we don't think there's a problem. You know, we're not really jumped. They didn't seem anxious to look into it very deeply. But when you consider that the peer reviewers of this study, even the man who designed this study, Dr. Ron Melnick, who's now retired, said, this is the time now when you need to take a look and refer the matter to the International Agency on Research on Cancer, which is part of the World Health, the United Nations, to do a review of the science, because there are confirming studies based on epidemiology, human epidemiology studies, and other animal studies that confirm this study. So there's a lot of evidence that would justify raising the level from a possible to a probable human carcinogen. When IARC did that on glyphosate about 8 months ago, things happened. You all may know that. Things happened. Monsanto went out of business. They let themselves be bought up by Bayer. So things need to happen. In 1971, the U.S. Naval Research Office of Naval Research, they produced a chart showing what the symptoms are for people who have microwave sickness or electrical hypersensitivity. And the symptoms are all listed there in terms of parts of the body: the brain, the eyes, the heart, the lungs, the skin, etc. The print's too small for you to read all of that, but the point is, this report came out in 1971 by the U.S. Navy. Why are we not paying attention to that? Because more and more people are experiencing these effects. I direct a appeal to the United Nations on this, done by scientists who have published on electromagnetic fields and have found effects below the current standards set by the FCC and international agencies. 244 scientists who have published in this field in 41 nations have signed this appeal, and it's made its way all over the world. It's a very credible statement about the state of the science, and we have yet to get an answer back from the World Health Organization, the UN Environment Program, or the head of the UN to whom we addressed it. This is the electromagnetic spectrum. So non-ionizing radiation, which is the portion of the spectrum we're talking about, has not been considered hazardous by and large. And until about 8 decades ago, when a lot of research started coming out of Eastern Europe, and then with the military, and then certain occupations were studied. And so here we are today, where there have been a massive amount of studies over decades pointing towards harm, with no intervention to lower the threshold. Many people have the old physics view that unless an electron is knocked off its circuit, there's no problem. Well, there is not a heating effect at all. There's no heating involved. What's involved is information is being transmitted to all the cells of our body, and our body is responding to the signal that way. Information to the cell. Finally, why use multi-millimeter wave radiation for 5G wireless? Well, it seems to work just fine for the military. They use it for weaponry and surveillance at very high powers. So they're taking that technology and they're going to now distribute it commercially at lower power. So we don't know whether lower power makes a difference, yes or no, in terms of effects, adverse effects. But we do know that there's a history of this technology being used for weaponry and surveillance. It raises a lot of questions. The signals are very short. They're like just a matter of inches or less. So they're in the same range as an insect or a fetus, a developing fetus, and therefore can be much more harmful. And we are losing our insect population around the world already. So it's cause for concern, because this kind of blunt signal, which is going to be piercing the walls of our buildings, may contain capable of causing serious harm. Then where do we go? People who are sensitive to this may be having trouble finding an alternative place where they feel safe to live. Okay, so I'm done with my portion, and I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Martin Paul. Dr. Paul is a professor emeritus of biochemistry and basic medical sciences in the School of Molecular Biosciences at Washington State University. He has long focused on biological and regulatory mechanisms of chronic inflammatory diseases, and is particularly an expert in how wireless radiation affects the cells of our body. Dr. Paul?
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me. We've got a lot to talk about here. What I'm going to do is talk initially about microwave frequency EMFs and how they work, because understanding that is essential to understanding 5G. So we'll be emphasizing that, the kinds of exposures that we're already exposed to from cell phones and cordless phones and cell phone towers and Wi-Fi, et cetera, smart meters and so forth. And then we're going to transition to 5G. So, U.S. and international safety guidelines, as Elizabeth Kelly just mentioned, are based on only thermal, that is, heating effects. But there are many non-thermal effects that occur at levels orders of magnitude lower than those allowed by these guidelines. So these guidelines have been known to be completely inadequate for many, many years. And these inadequacies are shown by the many different review articles that have reported a variety of different effects that occur. And so I'm going to talk about 8 different effects where there are huge numbers of review articles, which means there's a vast primary literature citation showing that these things occur, and therefore there should be no question about their occurrence. The first 3 of these, we're going to talk about lowered fertility. There have been studies on lowered fertility both in humans and in animals, and you see changes in the structure of the testis, of the ovaries. You get lowered sperm count, lowered sperm quality, lowered number of eggs. You get increased spontaneous abortion. You get lowered levels of each of the 3 sex hormones, and you also get lowered libido. So there should be no question that there are quite a variety of different effects on producing lowered fertility. There are also widespread neurological and neuropsychiatric effects. We have 25 reviews that have been published on that. You get insomnia, fatigue, depression, headache, lack of concentration, cognitive dysfunction, anxiety, stress, agitation, memory dysfunction. You also get dysfunction of the sensory organs. So you have major brain changes that have been studied at great length in animals. And so we have a lot of different effects that have been reported over and over and over again in these reviews. There should be no question about their occurring. And these effects, as you've seen, are becoming so common in all of our technologically advanced countries on Earth. So we're very far along in terms of these effects in human populations. There's cellular DNA damage of 3 different types, which I've listed here. These are important for causation of both cancer and also germline mutations that would cause mutations in any future babies that are born with them. There's apoptosis, which is a mechanism of programmed cell death that occurs. 13 reviews on that. These are very important for a lot of different effects, particularly the reproductive effects and the neurodegenerative effects. So we've talked about one, we haven't talked about the other at this point. Oxidative stress and free radical damage. There are 19 reviews on that occurring over and over and over again, and that's responsible for a large number of different effects. Let me just say that oxidative stress and free radical damage is involved in almost every single chronic disease you can name. There are also hormonal effects, that is endocrine effects. There are 12 different reviews on that, and they are a variety of different hormones have been shown to be affected by the EMFs. You get excessive levels of intracellular calcium in the cells of our body, and that, as I'll discuss shortly, is the cause of almost everything else that we're going to talk about. So this is the basic cause of almost everything that we're concerned about. There are 35 reviews on cancer causation by EMFs, and as you've already heard, it's almost inexplicable, but we're still discussing whether cancer is occurring, and that's, I think, ridiculous based simply on these very large numbers of reviews. Now, one of the things about the EMFs that's been long established is that pulsed EMFs that pulse up and down very rapidly, are in most cases much more biologically active than our non-pulsed or what are called continuous wave EMFs. And so we're comparing here pulsed EMFs with continuous wave EMFs of the same average exposure and same average intensity. Now, because all wireless communication devices communicate via pulsations, they are potentially, and I believe actually, much more dangerous. And this is something that's widely ignored by the industry over and over and over again, despite the fact that studies on this go back well into the 1970s, and there have been huge numbers of studies over the years on these things. So there are also other effects which I've listed as probable effects, where there's also substantial evidence, but not the kind of overwhelming evidence that I discussed for those other 9 issues. There are cardiac effects that work via the electrical control of the heart that are important. There's very, very early onset Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, which are of concern. There's specific concern about both ADHD and autism in terms of causation by late prenatal and early postnatal EMF exposures. And there's also electromagnetic hypersensitivity, EHS. We don't really have time to talk about the kinds of evidence that are involved in leading to these effects. So there are also 5 different types of evidence that provide, okay, I guess something got skipped out of here. Can I go back? I don't know if I can go back. All right. Okay, so looks like I'm missing something. Anyway, no, I guess it's okay. Okay, so I published a paper in 2013 showing that there were large numbers of studies which showed that you could block or greatly lower the effects of EMFs, and a lot of these were done in cell culture, by using what are known as calcium channel blockers. These are drugs which are specific for blocking what are called voltage-gated calcium channels. And the voltage-gated calcium channels, which I abbreviate VGCCs, as you see there, are channels that occur in the membrane that surrounds our cells. So every cell in our body is surrounded by a plasma membrane, and these are channels in the membrane such that when those channels open up, which is what happens on EMF exposure, you get huge amounts of calcium flowing into the cell. And it's the excessive calcium in the cell that's responsible for most, if not all, of biological effects. And what's surprising here is that it's not just microwave frequency EMFs that do this. All the EMFs, all the way ranging from millimeter wave things that are going to be involved in 5G, through microwaves, through radio frequency, through extremely low, intermediate frequency, extremely low frequency from our power wiring, and also even static electrical fields and static magnetic fields. They all work through the same target to activate these VGCCs. That's really quite striking, and obviously is a important finding. So we have we also have some other voltage-gated ion channels that are also activated, but the VGCCs seem to be the most important of them in terms of producing effects. And all of these channels then that are activated by the EMFs are controlled by a structure called the voltage sensor. This is a structure which detects electrical changes across the plasma membrane and can open channels in response to those changes. And what I'm going to tell you is that that voltage sensor is extraordinarily sensitive to the forces to the electrical forces that are produced by these very low intensity EMFs that we're talking about. And so industry acknowledges that microwave frequency and lower frequency EMFs can put forces on charged groups, positive and negatively charged groups. But the industry states that the forces are too weak to do anything. And what I'm going to show you is why that is clearly not true. So this is a kind of a two-dimensional model of the VGCCs with the voltage sensors. And I'm using this not because it's accurate in all respects, but because it's understandable. And so I can talk about it more easily. Now, if you look at this structure, what you'll see is there are 4 different domains in this protein that look very similar to each other. So Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, and 4. And each of them contains 6 of these cylinders that are listed here. Each of those cylinders is an alpha helix, which is a kind of a structure in a protein that has a kind of a helical structure. So the whole structure as a whole looks like a cylinder. And what you'll see here is that the 4th helix in each of these domains is colored orange, and that's to tell you it's different, okay? I mean, it really doesn't have a different color, but this is to communicate to you that it's different. And what you'll see is those orange helices each have 5 positive charges in it. You see the plus, 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 pluses going up and down those? Those 4 helices are collectively the voltage sensor. They are the structure which detects electrical changes and opens the channel, okay? So they've got a total of 20 charges in them. And those helices, unlike this structure, are actually tilted so that they are actually within the fatty section of the membrane. So the membrane is shown here. You can see it with these things. And those positive charges are all within this fatty section from here to there of the membrane. And that's important for 2 very important reasons. One is that according to Coulomb's law, this is a law of physics that was stated initially in 1784. So this is an old law of physics. And it states that the forces on those charges is inversely proportional to the dielectric constant in which they occur. And the dielectric constant of the fatty parts of the membrane is about 1/120th of the dielectric constant of the aqueous parts of the cell and of our body. So what that means then is the forces are about 120 times stronger, okay, because of Coulomb's law. And so we have 3 factors, in fact, that influence the electrical forces on this, and this all comes out of the basic physics. So the physics is very important here. And oh, there we go. So one is there are 20 charges on the voltage sensor, not just one. So if you're comparing this now with singly charged groups in the aqueous parts of the cell, the forces are 20 times stronger because of there are 20 charges. This doesn't. Oh, there we go. Coulomb's law, because of the dielectric constant, says they're 120 times stronger because of the dielectric constant. And then there's another factor that's even bigger, and that is the plasma membrane has a very high electrical resistance. And another old law of physics, Ohm's law, predicts that the electrical gradients across the plasma membrane are amplified about 3,000-fold across the plasma membrane because of that. And so we have those 3 factors, and what you then get is that again, comparing it with singly charged groups in the aqueous parts of the cell, the forces on the voltage sensor are about 7.2 million times stronger. So this is a extraordinarily powerful force on these, and this is why the VGCCs are so sensitive to these EMFs, and how you can then get these various effects at extremely low exposures. And so basically says that all the industry claims about safety are completely and utterly wrong, and it's shown by this. Now let me just say the 7.2 million calculation is an approximation. I'm not arguing this number is precisely right, but what it shows is the kind of order of magnitude that we're talking about here, and it's truly extraordinary. There was a study published by Takia et al. in 2016 which showed that you can take isolated plasma membranes, no cells at all, and the VGCCs in those membranes can be activated by microwave frequency EMFs in a totally in vitro system. So there's no cells, there's no regulation, there's no nothing. It's a direct effect on the VGCCs. There are 4 reasons why EMFs are much more active in children than adults. And the first of them is that children have much higher surface to volume ratios, and they also have thinner skulls, so the brains are more sensitive. but in general, their bodies are more sensitive. There are three other reasons that have been discussed by various scientists that are each quite important. One is that children have very high densities of stem cells, and the stem cells have been shown to be very sensitive to the EMFs. This has been discussed by Dr. Belyaya, so that's one important thing. The developing brain appears to be especially sensitive to the EMFs, and I won't have time to talk about how I think what the mechanisms are that are involved here. And then fourthly, and this is something Dr. Davis has talked about, young tissues have much greater extracellular water content, and for that reason, the effects of the EMFs are much more deeply penetrating into young tissues. So these effects on the effects on of Wi-Fi and of cell phone towers in schools are of particular concern because of this. Because the children in the schools are particularly sensitive to these EMFs. How then do you get effects through these? And the answer really comes from this figure here. These are all known pathways. So you get various kinds of EMFs that activate the VGCCs and produce increases in intracellular calcium. That's Ca2 plus I don't know if you can see this in the back, is intracellular calcium. And one of the things you get, calcium signaling is extremely important in the cells of our bodies. And so if you have excessive calcium in the cell, you get excessive calcium signaling. That can cause all kinds of problems, and they can produce pathophysiological, that is, damaging effects. You can also get damaging effects because you can get you get increases in both nitric oxide and superoxide from the calcium. Those two react with each other extremely rapidly to form peroxynitrite, which is this guy. Peroxynitrite is a potent oxidant that breaks down to form reactive free radicals, produce oxidative stress, and that in turn activates NF-kappa B, which produces inflammation. So you get chronic inflammation, you get oxidative stress, you get a lot of damage from peroxynitrite and free radicals. All of those can then contribute to the pathophysiological effects, which we've talked about before. Let me just say one other thing about this, and that is there are genuine therapeutic effects of these EMFs, and they have to be recognized as well. Under suitable conditions, you can get, by focusing the EMFs on a particular part of the body that has a problem at the appropriate level, you can get therapeutic effects, and they're thought to occur through this pathway that I've indicated here. So, okay, so let's go on. I have a table which describes how each of these effects are produced through those mechanisms that we talked about. We don't have time to talk about these, so basically what I'm doing is just flashing through these basically to show you that, yeah, we do have reasons, we do have understandings of how these things can occur. Yeah, go ahead, next slide. Next slide. Okay, so one of the things about these effects is that a number of them are, based on the best available evidence, appear to be cumulative, and as they become more severe, they are apparently irreversible. And so that gives us a very great concern. And so let me just say my personal concern, my biggest three concerns, have to do with the three first things that I listed originally when we started talking about those 8 different effects at the beginning of my talk. I'm very concerned about the neurological, neuropsychiatric effects and the fact that as they accumulate over time and become more severe and irreversible, that we will see, I believe, within a few years, a crash in our collective brain function. And if we, in fact, see that, we'll just go into utter chaos because everything is dependent on our collective brain function. I've estimated, and this is a very rough estimate, and I want to emphasize that, I've estimated, based on what human studies we have and what animal studies we have, that we may actually expect to see that, and those are already far along in our society. I mentioned that before. We may see a crash in our collective brain function in something like 5 to 7 years. So, this is a very rough estimate, but I think that the risks that we're taking are absolutely extraordinary. They're risks that no rational society on Earth can possibly take, but we are taking them. And that's based on the exposures we already have. I also think we're looking at a crash in our reproductive function. And I think we're already, again, far along in that process. And I also think that the first evidence of such an absolute crash in reproduction have occurred in 3 East Asian countries, starting in 2017. So I'm very concerned about that. And the third thing I'm very concerned about are the possible massive impacts on our gene pool caused by the EMF-induced germline mutations. Here, I really don't know how far along we are. I found no good information about what's happened to human mutation frequencies over the last 15 or 20 years. And we need that information, but I haven't been able to find any such. So I don't know how far along that is. Let's talk about 5G. Now, 5G will entail, as I think Elizabeth Kelly has already mentioned, the use of much higher frequencies than the current microwave frequency devices. This will allow 5G to carry much higher levels of pulsations and therefore carry much more information per second. So the amount of information that can be carried is much greater, and that is the essential attractive feature of 5G for the industry. However, the 5G millimeter wave EMFs are much more absorbed by building materials and other materials, including materials in our bodies. Now, both the frequency and pulsation of 5G predict that it will be much more active in activating the VGCC voltage sensor. And the reason is, first of all, we've already talked about the pulsations. This is going to be extraordinarily highly pulsed. And secondly, the simple fact that these are absorbed so readily suggests that they're going to interact with charge groups much more actively. And therefore, they'll be much more active in activating the voltage sensor of the VGCCs. So I'm deeply concerned about that. Because 5G millimeter wave radiation is much more absorbed by building materials, the plan is to put out tens of millions of these antennae all over the place in close juxtaposition to all of our homes and all of our other buildings, making it essentially impossible to avoid high-level exposures, especially if we're outdoors. And there we have, it's much more difficult to protect ourselves. Each of these properties suggests that 5G will be vastly more dangerous than our already existing exposures, and our already existing exposures, as I just stated, are already extremely dangerous. The industry claims that 5G will be largely absorbed in the outer 1 millimeter or so of the body. And to the extent this is true, most other living organisms will be impacted much more than we will. Why? Because we have relatively large bodies. And so, let me just say, what I'm going to tell you is there is some truth to this, but there is also a substantial untruth to this. To the extent that it's true, insects, small mammals, and birds will be much more impacted than we will. The same thing is true of plants, including even large trees, whose leaves and reproductive organs are highly exposed. I predict that there will be major ecological disasters, including massive fires, with these last being caused by the fact that EMFs make plants much more flammable. It is my opinion that the stunning heat of the recent California fires is likely to be caused by the impact of our already extant EMFs on plants. While the industry claims that 5G effects will be limited to the outer 1 millimeter of the body, they've also been claiming that microwave frequency EMFs will be limited to the outer 1 centimeter or so of the body, and we know that this is untrue. And so I'm going to discuss the deepest known penetration of microwave frequency EMFs, and then return to the question about how both the microwave and also the 5G millimeter waves can act very deeply in the body. So Professor Hessig and his colleagues in Switzerland published 2 studies showing that pregnant cattle grazing near a cell phone tower produce large numbers of newborn calves with high incidences of cataracts. So the calf fetus is buried very deeply in the mother's body, should be protected from these EMFs, according to what the industry claims, and there should never be any effects on the fetus. But here you have these very clear effects that are occurring something like 40 times deeper than the industry claims is possible. So how then can that happen? And I think that while the okay, so let's talk about so how can these effects be very deep in the body? So the fact is, electromagnetic fields are made up of both an electrical and a magnetic component. The electrical component is absorbed much more readily in materials, including the materials of our bodies, than the magnetic components. This has been known for decades. And so there is an argument to say that most of the electrical effects of 5G will be absorbed in the outer 1 millimeter of the body. However, the magnetic parts are vastly more penetrating, and because of that, they can go into the body. What they can do is they can put forces on ions that are dissolved in the aqueous parts of our bodies, and when they put forces on those charged groups, what do? They cause them to move, and that in turn will reconstitute the electrical part of the EMF deep in the body, exactly the same frequency, exactly the same pulsations, just at much lower intensity. But when you've got the voltage sensor that's extraordinarily sensitive to these EMFs, you can get effects. I think that's exactly how you get the cataracts in these newborn calves. And I think that 5G will similarly produce many, many effects deep in the body through this mechanism. So, yeah, right, I'm almost there. So I predict 5G will produce effects similar to those produced by microwave frequencies, but they will be much more severe. I also predict that there are a number of effects that are particularly associated with aqueous parts of our body, which are listed there. And I guess I'll skip over because we don't have time to talk about them. And the current plan that's already been approved by the FCC and the Congress in the U.S. is to put out tens of millions of 5G antennae without doing one single biological safety test of genuine 5G. Europe and East Asia seem to be following in similar paths. This, in my view, is absolute insanity. Thank you very much.
Sometimes it's important to have repetition when you're learning something new. So you may not have integrated all of that what Dr. Paul revealed today. He's in high demand around the world, I want you to know. We're very fortunate to have had him here with us. If you didn't pick one up, there are 2 people here available to give you a 3x5 card. If you've learned something here and want to know a little more about it, you can write your question down while it's still on your mind and pass it to the middle, and somebody will be by to pick them up. So if you raise your hand if you want a card, if you have a question, because I'm sure that his lecture is raising a lot of issues. Robbie, there's somebody on the back left over there. Rena, over in the back left. Anybody else have their hands up? So if you want a card, raise your hand, and we'll be collecting them right at the time of the 10-minute break. So to continue, I'd next like to introduce to you Timothy Scholey. Dr. Scholey is the author of a book that is at the table out there called Reinventing Wires, The Future of Landlines and Networks. And while I'm on the subject, the FCC did approve removing our copper line, wireline phone system in the United States. And if that happens, by the way, before all the 5G is up, there are going to be people in rural areas, remote areas, that will have no phone communications at all. People are just shocked that they're doing this, because by doing this, the phone companies are changing their mission. They've always said that they would leave no consumer behind. Well, you're leaving citizens behind, too, on all of this. To continue, Dr. Sheckley is a communications technology expert, international consultant in computer engineering and standardization, formerly on the faculty at the University of Colorado Boulder in the College of Engineering and Applied Science. And finally, he's a senior research fellow for the National Institute for Science, Law, and Public Policy. Dr. Sheckley?
Well, thank you, Libby. As she mentioned, this book, which has just been published by the National Institute for Science, Law, and Public Policy, is available in the back of the room, in the lobby there. We have a number of copies available. So I've tried to make this a pretty cross-cutting document that describes the entire field, some of the things you've heard of today and that you'll hear further about, and the history of it. Basically, let me see how this works. Okay. Fifth generation wireless, technological revolution, or Pandora's box. So I have 4 questions I want to address off the top here. What is 5G? Well, although it was described earlier as what will be, we don't know for that for sure, because it's a lot of promises. It's not finished yet. The standards aren't set yet. It is a lot of there's an awful lot of high hype factor with it, because it's as I will describe, it's a big promotion by the industry. So it's really hard to tell exactly what's real and what isn't, but it's not there yet, and we might want to think about it before we let that happen. The promise is higher speed, lower latency, and more cell density and antennas. Latency, by the way, is the response time. So when you push a button, how quick does your response come back? That's what latency means. In reality, I think that there's a good case to be made that it's really about advertising. It's about more advertising, video games, virtual reality headsets. It's about selling more chips, software, and collecting more data on people, and not so much about consumer demand. It's driven, who is driving 5G? It's being driven by the telecommunication carriers, Verizon, AT&T, Comcast, a triopoly of corporations, and it's also driven by the semiconductor industry and the data and media and advertising industries. It's not driven by consumer demand. What are the risks? Health, costs, net neutrality, democracy. As was mentioned earlier, the FCC and state laws have been engineered to force this into our communities, and without adequate research, without adequate studies, it's a matter of making money. It's all about the money. It's a massive experiment with the public as the guinea pig. They don't really know what the effects of all this technology is going to be. And there's another risk, is the lack of an alternative to 5G, and that's what I'm going to talk about. What is the alternative? Well, the case I make in Reinventing Wires is wired networks, particularly optical fiber, to every premises, to every home and every business in the country, owned and controlled by the local community, not by large corporations. That's the best way to deal with the problem. And then if you want 5G or 4G or any kind of wireless services, which everybody has a need for generally, you can have it can be optional. It's up to you rather than the corporations. The next slide is just to say where are we on the general picture here. This is a graph from a recent report last year that was published last year by Morgan Stanley, the investment company. The vertical bar is billions of dollars invested. It goes up to 40 billion at the top. The horizontal scale is the year. If we look on the blue bars this chart starts with 3G wireless, which we really got going in around 2000 and is still in use. The next set, the amber colored or tan covered colored bars are 4G wireless, or another version of 3G, or the introduction. And 4G is the green bars, I guess I got that wrong. The blue bars were 2G, and then 3G started, and those are the brown bars, and then the green bars are the introduction of 4G, which is the dominant. If you have a smartphone or any kind of a cell phone today, it's probably using 4G. But it's the other technologies are still in place and still used. You can see that the 5G is, if you look at the bar for 2018, it's barely being introduced. Very little investment has been made, and huge investments will still continue to be made in 4G. So I guess the point of this chart is that the industry hasn't invested in 5G yet. You're hearing a lot of hype about it and laws being passed and policy decisions made to try to force it out, but it's not to force it into use, but it hasn't been done yet. It's just starting. And I think it's problematic whether it will actually happen or not. So, the next slide. My report, Reinventing Wires, basically, this is an executive summary of the report. The internet has become one of the defining technologies of the modern world. Why has America, its creator, become one of the most impoverished users among all the developed nations in terms of the proportion of its people with internet access and the speed and quality of that access? This report seeks to address these questions and propose answers and solutions. It explores the historical forces at play, the emerging technologies, wired and wireless, and the public policy choices and opportunities that we face. You can download electronic copies of the report also. So the next slide. Consolidation and market power. That's what this compares wired and wireless. Internet access, my report makes the case that internet access has been hijacked by commercial interests. America is down to number 17 among the developed countries in internet access. The services in this country are dominated by a triopoly consisting of Comcast, Verizon, and AT&T. They keep access slow, scarce, and expensive. Regulated networks have been disadvantaged and neglected by policy decisions, particularly the Telecommunications Act of 1996. The money for supporting the wired infrastructure has been diverted to support the wireless infrastructure. And and the carriers have repositioned themselves from wired carriers to wireless, but I should also point out that the wireless requires wires. It requires optical fiber. All the cell sites have to be connected with optical fiber. So they've just used that optical fiber not to bring it to your house, but to bring it to the cell site. The wireless smartphones are being oversold because wireless is more profitable. Wireless is unregulated. Wireless was unregulated, and the phone companies basically diverted their resources to supporting the wireless services, and the cable industry was always unregulated. Wireless is not a substitute for wires. As handy as it is, it can never have the performance of a wire, either a copper wire or of optical fiber. There's a push by phone companies to decommission the landlines so that you'll be, as this was just mentioned, so that you will be forced to sign up for wireless services. Okay. So it's about consolidation and market power. The 5G is a mirage. It's overhyped and it's not needed. 4G will, as the chart earlier showed, will be around for quite a while, and it does a pretty good job, especially if you don't need to get those fast ads. The 5G is about selling ads, chips, applications, and personal data. And if you've been following the discussion around Facebook recently, there was New York Times ran a huge article just 2 days ago, and there's been a whole chain of articles that have come out on that just in the last couple of days about what's really been going on and how Facebook has been a source of invasions of personal privacy on a massive scale unimagined before. So it's all about the video and the ads. 5G is a technological gamble, as you've heard a little bit. The millimeter waves, the frequencies proposed to be used by 5G, are highly directional, even more so than the microwaves that are your present cellular phones might use, and the effects are completely unknown, as was described by my colleague earlier. Why do we need more deep fiber? We would need fiber anyway, because, as I say, the cell sites all have to get their backhaul with work into the telecom network runs on fiber. It doesn't run on wireless. People have the illusion with a cell phone or a smartphone that they're talking directly to the cloud, as we call it. Well, that's not the case. You're just talking a few hundred feet or a mile or a couple of miles to a cell site, and then it goes into a network of fiber that connects to the mythical cloud. It's really connecting to a server somewhere else using optical fiber. So why not just bring the fiber to your house? It makes more sense. And your office, so you can run a business out of your house if you want. It's been done. It's being done all over the country, and there is a national movement to do this. The town next door to me, Longmont, Colorado, is the latest example of the state-of-the-art in optical fiber. The locally owned, municipally owned power company ran optical fiber to everybody in the town along with their electric wires. And they can get 1 gigabit per second, both directions, up and down, for $49 a month from the city. I mean, why would we want why would we want anything else? I mean, you can still have a cell phone, but you just don't use it the way that you would use it in your home or office. If you're really doing something serious, you need to have that kind of access. The Internet of Things is a great buzzword these days, and you saw a chart earlier that showed some of the mythology that's emerged around that idea. But it's really a fallacy because, and I work on this all the time in my engineering work, and I work on technical standards for this, but it doesn't require the kind of performance of 5G. It does not require, because it's not for distributing advertising. It's just for remote control of things and sensing things. Something I'll mention in a minute, which is the smart city concept. You don't need 5G for the Internet of Things. The issue here is not about whether we will have fiber networks in our cities and towns. The question is whether they're going to come to your house or not, and who's going to own and control them. That's the issue. And 5G is about having your access to the Internet controlled by one of 3 large corporations, or whether you're going to own it yourself and your community will own it. So, local municipal fiber, well, everybody needs wired access first, and then you might want to get wireless services but wireless is really for things that move. That's where you really need it. But if you're working in a stationary location, the fiber is much better. Fiber has become a basic public utility. I look at access to the Internet is comparable to having water service, for having sewer service, paved streets, things like that, and optical fiber and then electric power probably. It needs to be under the control of the local community. Let's jump to the next one. I'll just skip over this. I'll cover this in a minute. Let me jump down to some of this. I mentioned some of this already. I'm going to jump down to I have a list of 13 reasons for fiber, and there's a chart out in the lobby there, and you might see some placards around here that list these 13 points, and you might want to take a look at those. These are, I won't go into them right now, but those are on the charts, and there's a little postcard that's in the back that you can take away that includes a copy of this list of 13 points. It's a little card like that. Okay, let me wind up here with, let's see. There, smart city. Okay. I just wanted to mention this in closing. The smart city is a concept that's important, but it's also one that's pretty tricky. The definition of a smart city, and you may hear this more and more, is the use of information technology to make a city work better. It's an organic system of infrastructure and applications, and that means, when I say organic, I mean it can grow and it changes. It is adapting to the needs of a particular city. So smart city is not a particular technology. It's a whole set of technologies. Now, I would like, the caveat here is that it sounds good, but beware. It's easily hijacked by commercial interests. And it's important that it be under the control of the community that it is affecting. It's more of a marketing concept than a specific technology. And corporations are interested in it because it seeks the municipal rights of way and taxing authority. And that's one of the things that's being preempted by these state and federal actions recently by the FCC, is in particular, is to take that away from you as a community. Interoperability and the modular integration of functions is a highly touted benefit, but it also has a downside you need to be careful of. An example might be that in making all these systems interoperable, for instance, you also make that data vulnerable to being captured or stolen or hacked. So you have to be careful how it's done. In any case, no matter what, the basic infrastructure for the smart city is optical fiber first, and not 5G or any other kind of wireless. And the next slide, and then I'll close with that. This is a laundry list, basically, of smart city applications. It includes public safety, water systems, making them work better, energy systems, smart grid, clean energy, smart buildings, efficient and friendly, transportation systems that work, health services, the delivery of public services, government communication, education and training, work at home and entertainment, voice communication services, travel reduction through teleconferencing and audio conferencing, and small businesses opportunities. The classic case of this has been the success of the optical fiber network, but installed in Chattanooga, Tennessee is one of the examples that people use for reinvigorating an old Rust Belt city by installing optical fiber and creating an economic boom that was worth hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. So thank you very much. I close with one more. Fiber first. Basic public utility like water, sewer, streets. Don't wait or you may get stuck with 5G. Put in your optical fiber now. Wireless is optional. It's a proprietary walled garden. Wireless is for things that move. Local community ownership and control is vital. Thank you.
Well, I'm very glad that Tim could be with us today. Has a rare perspective on all of this, and I'm glad we could have him here to share it with you. There's a group called the Institute for Self-Reliance that communities are networking through who want to go own their own fiber network, and you can look them up on the internet. If you have any questions, please raise your hand for the card or send your card over to the middle aisle. And I'd like to ask Rena and Robbie to start collecting those cards and bringing them up to me. I think it's better if we skip the break because we're running a little over time and I don't want to cut Eric Windheim short. So I'll introduce Eric now, and then from then we'll just go into the question and answer period. Eric Windheim is a building biologist. He lives in Sacramento. His job is to detect and mitigate and shield and reduce electromagnetic field exposure for people so they don't experience any problems with exposure, and that they can stay in their own home and live a healthy life. And he's very committed to this. He's helped a lot of people. He's from Northern California, and I'd like to welcome Eric Windheim.
Okay, yeah, my name is Eric Windheim. I live in Sacramento. My company, Windheim EMF Solutions, the motto is less EMF, better health, live longer. And that's provable with all kinds of thousands of peer-reviewed studies. Okay, so that's me, and I'm certified to advise homeowners, building inspectors, home purchasers about how to minimize the presence of man-made electromagnetic radiation in the built environment, particularly as it relates to man-made energy, electricity, and all of its derivatives. Our goal is to produce a house where people feel better. 85% of my clients already hurt. They feel bad when they leave, when they get home, and they feel better when they get out of the house. So some principles of building biology. is to verify that the site that you choose to live on is safe and free of natural occurring man-made health hazards. If you don't have a safe site, what?
Move closer to the mic.
Okay. If you don't have a safe site, nothing else is important, okay? Then we want to minimize it. You know, once we're there, maybe your house is already set up, how do we minimize man-made power system EMF generated inside the house? And the reason is you can't stay well in an EMF sick house, and you certainly can't get well. But all across America, we've got doctors sending you home with a new pill back to your sick house. Never once do they come out to your house and make an examination of the house itself. Okay, there's 4 kinds of electromagnetic radiation, also known as EMF, electric fields, magnetic fields, microwave radiation, dirty electricity. We're only talking about wireless radiation today, 3G, 4G, 5G. And they can cause discomfort, impairment, injury, sickness, and death. I've seen all of that in my clients. And I wanted to ask you, do you know someone that feels better when they leave the house and worse when they return it? They definitely should have an EMF assessment overview. Everybody should. Okay, so wireless radiation, we're going to look at external sources. That's from outside your house. There's 5G millimeter wave, there's 3G, 4G, TV, radio towers. And by the way, until the wireless revolution occurred in the 90s, the only risk really was from TV, radio, and radar. But now we've got WiMAX, we always had airport planes coming in. But with everything wireless now, it's everywhere. It's up and down your street. You can hold your breath, and as you drive, and you can still see 2 or 3 cell towers between breaths. Now, internal sources, this is all the stuff that you've been sold. Okay, wireless, Wi-Fi, cordless phone, cell tower, a cell phone, streaming TV, Xbox, laptop, tablets, microwave oven, smart meter, Apple Watch, Fitbit, etc. So the solution for those is to remove, replace, hardwire, reduce usage, and create usage. And I forgot this on the first one. The solution for external solutions is detect, avoid, and shield. We're going to show you a little bit of shielding, but you can't do much about a cell tower next to your house except avoid it or maybe shield from it. Okay, so what's happening around our house? Well, it's on the freeway. The Department of Defense has wonderful plans for you. They want to put radars on all 4 sides of your cars so that the insurance companies will be able to find out who's in the right lane, who's in the wrong lane, who's on the gas, who's on the brake, and how fast is everybody going, and who caused the accident. And the Department of Defense, Transportation says, oh no, we're just going to have you just take your foot off the gas, we're going to get all of you there. It's going to be wonderful, just trust us. And there's definitely not going to be any hacking involved. Now, in your living room, it really looks like a battlefield. There's so much different radiation moving back and forth. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 hours just to sniff out all the little Wi-Fi devices that are in people's homes. And then, outside your house, you may be looking at a few 3G and 4G cell towers. So what you need to do is avoid the sources and chronic exposure. Now, the big question is, are you going to have a 5G antenna outside your house? I've got one 200 feet away from my house. I bought a special spectrum analyzer to measure it. And so far, it's very low power because I'm not into beam. I'm not requesting data. But as the summer of next year, people will have handheld 5G cell phones, and you don't want to be anywhere near those people because they're going to be requesting a 5G download, and there's going to be collateral damage. These beams from the articles I've read are 3 degree to 10 degree in width. It's going to be aiming right at you, and you. And by the way, it's going to hit 2 or 3 people around you. That's collateral unwanted damage, unwanted radiation. So my suggestion is avoid people that are carrying a 5G device. Okay? Like lepers. Okay, that's simple. And those are pictures of the 5G antennas going up in my zip code right there. I was given no public warning. Somebody said, hey, Eric, they're putting them up now. No warning whatsoever. They don't think they need to. Okay, so I bought this little thing here, the Spectrum Compact by SAF, 24 to 40 gigahertz. It's up here. You can come over here and look at some of my instrumentation later, but please don't touch anything, okay? pick up a business card or something, but don't touch the instruments. That is a spectrum analyzer. It's used by professional antenna specialists. It's powerful. It's useful for detection of power levels. It has great software. The drawback is the price. It's very expensive. It's up in the close to $6,000 range. But it produces reports like you see on the left. And, you know, from the power level I'm receiving, even directly under the tower, it's 100 times under the no concern level for building biology precautionary guidelines, as long as you're out of the beam. Kind of like an escaped convict from a prison running across the field in the darkness until the spotlight from the guard tower gets on them. And then we all know what happens to those escapees. Once you're spotlighted by the 5G antenna, I expect that the RF compliance reports say that when you're underneath the pole, the most exposure you can get is 650,000 microwatts per meter squared. That's 650 times higher than the building biology extreme concern level. But not to worry. It's only 6.5% of what the FCC allows, so you've got nothing to worry about. But you got to choose who you're going to believe, okay? Okay, now these are the meters that we use for detecting RF. This is a directional meter. So we know there's something coming from that direction. Then once you find out the direction, now this is my favorite little one. I love this one. You just put it in your pocket everywhere you go. My wife gets tired of the noise, so I turn off the noise on it. But it measures the overall power density. Everybody should have something like this, just like something from your medicine chest. You've got to be able to detect when you're in a bad location. Now here's a more professional model. And we can measure the total amount of exposure. Okay, somebody's cell phone just went off. We got a cell phone user here. Okay, you'll be able to identify all these sounds just like bird calls after a while. Okay, so that put us over the 20 times over the extreme exposure level. So you need to get a meter to be able to protect yourself. There's no two ways about that. And if you have questions, you can go to my website. There's videos that shows you how to use the meter, which is very important, because if you don't know how to use it, you're not in very good condition. You have to be able to use your tools and understand them. And then you should take measurements and record them. So many times I have people call me, "Hey, Eric, I bought a meter and it's going crazy. It's spiking." I said, "Well, what is the exact amount?" "I don't know, just going off the top of the scale." So you have to write it down, and this is a form I use. The microwave radiation is on the second column on the left, and then there's magnetic field, dirty electricity, electric field. Then you need to say, okay, where in the house and what measurement. Without that, you're just in a panic, okay? And then once you've got your measurements, then you say, okay, what is the risk level of that measurement? Is it insignificant? Is it no concern, which means safe for everybody? Is it slight concern, which means it's safe for normal adults but not the sick, the infants, and the elderly? Is it a severe concern? That means everybody should fix it and avoid it if possible until it is fixed. Is it an extreme concern? That means avoid it until it is fixed. So you need to know what your risk level is. That's very important. Okay, now external solutions, detect and avoid before you rent, buy, or build. Don't fall in love with the sick building. Don't. Avoid views and vistas. There's so many beautiful views. I can see for miles across this valley. Guess what? You're a target. To be safe, the clients that are hiring me for real estate pre-purchase assessments, we're looking in the bottoms of canyons with no view. We're looking in places you find natural shelter in a narrow valley or depression. Avoid views of buildings, bridges, towers, poles, valleys, ridgelines, unless you own them, because somebody can put a tower on there, and I saw it happen to a customer just 2 weeks ago. Now, you can also surround your house with a dense wall of evergreen trees, such as cypress trees. They grow very tall and very fast, like 5 feet a year, and a double row of cypress trees stops almost all microwave radiation. It's got so much water in it. You can shield with radiant barrier foil, Y-shield paint, window film. Here's what I've been using in my hotel to shield me from the Wi-Fi. Blocks 97%. Don't leave home without it. Also, this is what we used in Arlington, Virginia for a 16,000 square foot roof redoing job. We put this underneath the roof. It's a special copper product from Germany called Q-Protect. Extremely effective and expensive. And then when you're on the airplane, the TSA had a lot of questions about this. They really did. They said it was a burqa. Okay, so it's best to get a professional opinion before you start spending thousands of bucks on shielding. But just the other day, somebody said, well, I don't want to spend money on a consultation. I don't want to buy the meters, but what kind of shielding do I need? I hear that over and over again. Don't spend any money until you know what your problem is, how intense it is, and where it's coming from. Okay, now we do know that certain materials block this 5G 28, 39, 73 gigahertz very well. You can see that over on the right-hand side there. So if you're going to rebuild, you might as well use stuff that's proven to stop this. It probably won't cost any more, and it could actually save you some money on your heating and air conditioning bill too. So there's materials that stops this stuff. It's not invincible. But internal solutions, you know, so often I see babies with baby monitors on each end of the crib, kind of like stadium lights. The poor little baby, he can't sleep, he's screaming. They have to medicate him and dope him down. It's really sad. Okay, so you need to detect and locate the sources, once again with the right meter. Remove the source, replace with a wired alternative, relocate the source. You know, even hand grenades and nuclear bombs have a safe distance if you're far enough away. You want to reduce usage, create sleep sanctuaries. You know, you need to have great sleep if you want to have a long, healthy life. You need great sleep for rest and repair. And you need to get professional guidance. Otherwise, you're a babe in the woods on this one. For the smart meter, keep the analog meter, demand the analog meter, get your neighbors to do the same. Shield the meter on the circumference if it's a smart meter and on the back, but not on the front. And if you can't get an analog meter, you might have to filter the digital meter to keep the dirty electricity from getting into your house. Cars, these people had a wife so sensitive she couldn't drive into town. They shielded the Volkswagen Eurovan with a special film and brought the exposure down 98%. Here's the film right here. It works extremely well. There's a lot of glass on that car, so it costs $1,200. So this is what we got to look forward to, spending $5,000 to $10,000 per household to protect ourselves from this so-called economic wonder. It doesn't pan out. There's no net economic gain to all this. Now this is some of my actual clients. That poor woman on the left has to wear that in her house because the radar from the top of Mount Tamalpais, the FAA radar, is blasting her house about every 9 to 10 seconds with a radar sweep. The woman on the other side of there was practicing for triathlons until the smart meter went on her house, and then she became so symptomatic she can't leave the house without wearing that $2,000 suit. So that you need to have zero EMF if you want to recover. You know, zero. Okay, now the bed canopies can work too if that's what you need. You better buy the right kind, the right material, and the right design, or it won't work as planned, and everything will be a waste. Poor quality design or product equals poor quality sleep. So, creating a sleep sanctuary. Get rid of electric clocks near the bed. Turn off all circuits related to the bedroom. Eliminate and shield from RF. Use beds without metal. Make sure there's no elevated magnetic fields. And this information's on my website. You can go there and fill out the contact form if you want to talk to me. Please don't call me first. Use the contact form. Many clients sleep better the very first night, and they rave about their sleep sanctuary. And we'd like to make one for you. It makes such a difference. They go, oh, I haven't slept this good in years. And that was the wife of someone who was married to a sleep pathologist who charges thousands of bucks for you to go to his sleep study. He never heard about making a sleep sanctuary like this. Okay, so the medical community doesn't have it. But here's the final slide. Who are you going to trust? Hey, the governments, they make all the rules, you know, and they say there's no problem, along with our captured governmental agencies like the FCC. No problem, nothing to see here. But independently funded scientists like Dr. Paul and Timothy Sheckley, oh yeah, they point out that even the government has admitted this. So you have to make your choice, and you have to be precautionary. Don't look for the government to protect you. I want to thank you for attending. I want you to use the contact form on my website if you have a simple question. Please don't give me a whole essay. I don't have time to read it all. I suggest you to schedule an EMF assessment with your nearest qualified professional in your area. Determine your exposure, get effective solutions, and start using technology safely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric Windheim. I think we need somebody like Eric just about everywhere right now, so we're so lucky to have him. There are some resources in town, and someone from EMF Experts is here today, and he has left some materials at the table by the door. Is that right, Chris? Good. So Chris Young is here from EMF Experts, and he's in town, and he not only can advise you, but he can train you to do it yourself and to help others even. So there's an opportunity there for you here in Tucson. It's hard to find those resources, so that's why I'm making sure to mention Mr. Young. There's a few questions here I have, and then I want to bring Ashley up to see what's going on our live stream conversation, because apparently they've been talking too. So I'd like her to tell us what they're talking about. But first I wanted to ask Eric a couple of questions. Eric, for people that are severely disabled, you've mentioned those people. They're wearing all this garb and staying indoors and so forth. But what about the people that are just moderately sensitive, like me?
Better do something before you end up like those people that are totally disabled. Like, do everything you can to cut off everything in the house. Do everything you can to avoid external sources, and start wearing some sort of protective material so you don't have to wrap yourself in a cocoon and leave normal society.
Thank you. These people who are severely affected, it's about roughly 3 to 4% of the population in the developed world. They are so marginalized in society. They're unable to participate. They could not be here. So I can be here, but I am careful about my environment. I have a wired home, and I hope I can keep it. One of the questions was from somebody about, I still value my landline. What can I do to fight to keep it? Well, I'm with you. I don't know how this is going to go. I don't want them to take my landline down, but they have the authority to do so, and they already are doing it in some parts of the country. I want to also ask Eric about dirty electricity. What does that mean?
That's the unintended consequence of energy-efficient devices. It's created by switching mode power supplies, pulse width modulators, variable speed motors, virtually everything that saves energy produces dirty electricity, and it radiates off the wiring in the form of radio frequency radiation, and you're in this electric cage called your house, and it's going to affect your blood sugar, your dopamine levels. Both of those are measurable. This is not science fiction. The laptop there is showing dirty electricity measured. We'll be answering that later on, but it's something you need to avoid.
Thank you. And I have one more question for you, Eric. You talked about us. Thank you. One more question. You talked about us all asking for analog meters in this town. Well, we can't do it. Tucson Electric Power offers one kind of meter now, alternatively to your old-fashioned analog meter. You can have a wired digital meter, and it's made by Itron, and that's what I opted out to have. It costs $26 a month to have that. So that's why, just because of finances, people keep their smart meter, the AMI meter that was put on within the past year, because they can't afford $26 a month. How do we get an analog meter here, Eric?
Well, since it's a public utility, you have the right to show up at board meetings. I showed up at 93 board meetings. We pinned those deceptive people up against the wall with their own words, one documentable lie after another, and they got tired of it, and they let us keep the analog meter. Now, I think the digital meter is a nice halfway thing. You should filter the dirty electricity, but if you get enough people up in arms, you can go in there and say $26 is simply extortion, and we want the analog meter back, just like many, many, many other utilities nationwide.
Thank you. There's a general question here. What can we in Arizona do to protect 5G from being installed here? I have read that Arizona will be the first state in the nation to install 5G. Actually, we're probably one of the last states to install 5G. Even though there was a state law passed that welcomed the accelerated deployment of 5G into Arizona, it's not happening in this area. It's happening up in Phoenix. Sprint is already installing 5G in Phoenix, and they're merging with T-Mobile. So and Microsoft is building a new smart city west of Phoenix, and that will be loaded with technology, with 5G and everything else. But one of the beauties of living in this area is it's a little slow catching on to things, and frankly, in this case, I am so happy to know that, because I've been talking to city officials, and we're asking a lot of questions. So far, I have not learned of any 5G installations in this area. Now, that doesn't mean it isn't happening. It's just I haven't heard it. And if it's not happening in the city, it's probably not happening out in the smaller towns around here. The Arizona League of Cities and Towns is representing all of the cities and towns in Arizona by challenging the FCC in federal court over these FCC rulings that just passed. They care a lot about not having this happen in Arizona. Even if the governor wants to, the cities and counties do not. So it's very interesting dialogue that must be going on at the state legislative level and with the cities and towns. And while we're talking about that, if you don't want 5G to go into this area, southern Arizona, let's say, talk to your public officials about it. Tell them why you are concerned about this. Tell them they need to take care in reviewing these applications if it comes to that, and that do everything they can. Pass an ordinance that kind of slows this down. That's what many cities are doing around the country. Let them know that you're concerned. That's how we can keep this at bay. What federal agency should be overseeing this? The fact is, there is no federal agency overseeing this. Starting over 20 years ago, there was a systematic attempt to stop the research, to stop the monitoring of emissions as a free public service, to shut down research programs within several federal health agencies so that we no longer would be part of the cutting edge in understanding of the effects of electromagnetic fields in general, including wireless radiation, but other parts of the spectrum as well. Basically, the government has been busy getting out of the business of any oversight on this issue. And with wireless, with 5G, this would be a totally unregulated activity run by a private business. and that could end up being the global design as well, the way this is going. So we do need to protect our democracy, but we're not going to find much help coming from the federal government. The public is not protected. How can I get Dr. Paul's information?
I've written a 90-page document that is on the internet that gives you almost everything that I've just talked about. You can find it by searching for it, but do not use Google. You will not find it on Google, okay? So if you put my name, Martin Paul, P-A-L-L, and electromagnetic, and 5G, and the date of it, which was May 17th, 2018, you should find copies of it. Do not use Google. Use a different search engine, and you can download it and read it.
Stay right there. I have another question for you.
Should I repeat
These
that?
are new questions.
Okay. So just my name, Martin Paul, P-A-L-L. Put in electromagnetic, put in 5G, and put in the date, May 17th, 2018, and you should find it.
What else beside EMFs might elevate cell calcium levels, and how do you isolate effects of EMFs, like calcium elevation?
Okay, good question. Well, there are actually quite a number of things that raise intracellular calcium. A lot of chemicals can do that. They work through a different pathway. They don't work through the VGCCs, but you can get increases through that. Oxidative stress can activate some channels also, and that can lead to excessive calcium. And so you can see right there, we've already talked about, you get oxidative stress, this will trigger another pathway to get you more excess calcium through a different route. Let's see, what was the rest of that question? Okay, how do you isolate the effects? I mean, these have been studied experimentally, and they also been studied in things like occupational exposure studies, and so there are good data. They don't come from the U.S. We don't do anything. They all come from different places, but we have good data on on the EMFs. We have good data on what happens when people live within 300 meters of a cell phone tower. We have good data on what happens from cell phone radiation. We have good data on what happens with Wi-Fi. None of these studies, not a single one of these studies, comes from the U.S. We are, by that criterion, and you can use a number of other criteria, by that criteria, we have the most corrupted science in the world. And I hate to say that as an American scientist, it's a disgrace.
How do EMFs make plants more flammable?
What EMFs do, that's a good question. I haven't published on this, by the way, yet. What EMFs do is first of all, they work in the cells of plants very similarly to the way they work in the cells of our body. They work by increasing intracellular calcium by working on channels in the plasma membrane in plants. I have published on that. What happens as a consequence of that is that the plants make much, much higher levels of terpenes, which are highly volatile and highly flammable. And it's a bit like having a light spray of gasoline on the plants. So they do become more flammable. This isn't the whole story, but it's all the story I think I have time to give you. But, yeah.
And one more for you. Well, are 4G cell phones safe? If not, why not?
Well, the feedback I've gotten from 4G is that they're quite dangerous, but I don't have any good data on it. I mean, this is from various kinds of sources, but it's all anecdotal. I don't know that there's been much, if anything, published on it. So my impression is that that 4G is quite dangerous, but that's an impression I can't really document terribly well.
I think you can go sit down now. I'll let you know if I have another one. Some more were coming in a minute ago. So for Tim, what is fiber optic made out of?
Glass. It's made out of very tiny, thin strand of glass, smaller than a human hair. And they bundle them together and pack in bundles of like 40, 50 fibers and put them in a plastic sheath. But it's just plain old glass, very clear.
But it's not something you make at home, right? It's a compressed, it's a very technical thing, of course, yes. It is glass, though. Why is it so cost efficient or effective? Why is it so cost efficient?
Well, it's only sending a message from one point to another point. It's not broadcasting in all directions like conventional radio systems. It's focusing. The light beam is going through a light pipe. Think of the optical fiber as a tiny light pipe that can go all the way around the world.
Thank you, Tim. And I have one more question for you. Would 5G crash our electrical grid? Does it take more power?
Well, that's a very good question. I have a whole chapter in Reinventing Wires devoted to that subject. Chapter 6, the energy efficiency of communication. And the short answer is, yeah, it might. The present trajectory of energy consumption by the internet in general, and particularly wireless access networks, is unsustainable. The growth rate is unsustainable, and 5G would just add to that. But if you look at the energy consumption of the global communications system and the internet, most of that it falls into two categories. The data centers take huge amounts of energy, and those are to support 90% of that is related to either spam or advertising. And the other big energy hog is the wireless access.
Here's a related question on electrical energy that you may want to handle, but somebody else may want to chime in. Talk about the safety of home solar systems.
Well, I think my colleague here just pointed out that all the energy-saving equipment, from lighting to motors and even solar energy, inverters and stuff like that, uses power supplies that are very good at creating dirty electricity. There are some, it doesn't necessarily so. It could be, they could be better designed, but they aren't right now, and that's something that needs to change.
I have clients that have sued Solar City because Solar City put in a very effective but cheap and dirty solar inverter on the house next door. Therefore, the lawsuit's in the public record. They also, I've been sick twice from Outback battery backup, solar inverter chargers. You can hold an AM radio in your hand, dial it down below 540, approach the house, and the radio starts buzzing when you're 25 feet away from the house. And it goes away when you turn off the solar inverter, so there's a lot of radio frequency radiation coming off. I felt so sick, I couldn't drive home. I missed lunch. I went to another house, did the same thing. Felt like I was drunk. I couldn't drive home at the speed limit. The dirty electricity from solar inverters is very real and very, very bad.
I could just say the same thing is true of my Mac PowerBook power wall, power supply.
Yes, and I also have experienced this in Tucson and in helping people in other places as well. These solar inverters can really be harmful. And I've tried to interact with one of our major solar companies here in town and coming up with the safest inverter I can find. And they are developing safer inverters, and they're coming out safer all the time. But this company will not interact with me about that. They prefer to use the inverters that they want to use. They don't discuss making any custom changes for people, with me anyway. So if you're a customer interested in solar, you have to cut a deal. Be real tough about making sure you get a safe one, and pay attention to that, because these installers are not looking at that issue at all. Is it useful to use EMF shielding devices on cell phones to lower EMF radio frequency?
I call those things high-tech rabbit feet. They don't reduce the energy, the electromagnetic waves that we measure with our meters. There's no detection of any change in the reduction of anything that obeys the laws of physics, from chips, decals, etc., on smartphones, back phones, anything. I think it gives you a good deal of hope, though. We do have a policy on that on the building biology website. It's a position paper. It says if it works, great, keep it. If it doesn't, send it back quickly and get a refund.
Thank you, Tim. I can handle this, I think. Are there any studies being done using those of us who are already electrically hypersensitive? Yes, there is a physician at the UC San Diego Medical School. Her name is Beatrice Golem, and she's been doing a research project and testing people who are EMF sensitive. She has a whole history of looking at toxic substances and is very outspoken, a real strong advocate for people who are sensitive. And you can contact her if you can't reach her through going through the UC San Diego website. You can contact me, and I'd be glad to put you in touch with her. She has an ongoing research project, and this is really important, and thank you for volunteering. I can't take questions from the audience, but you can write your question down and send it up. Why are our city council members not here? Well, is anybody here a city council member? Because I want to make sure that's true. They're not here. Well, it's not that they weren't invited. In fact, we let them know about this event. We sent them an invitation, in fact. We even set up a special meeting yesterday called Community Leaders Briefing. And we did get some RSVPs, but even fewer people than that actually came. This didn't hold us back. We went ahead full steam with the same program, only shorter, the one you're having with us today. But we did have the director of Raul Grijalva's office here yesterday. And people came from Cox as well. They were invited, and they came and sat and listened. And that's good, because we need to have a community dialogue about all of this. And Cox Communications wants to be a good neighbor and be a good partner. So we hope that they will attend. We want to talk with them. I'm scanning through all these questions. And I think somebody just put a card on the desk, but I'm not sure. Oh, here we are. Found it. Can a Gauss meter register the dirty electricity from solar panels? I just put one up next door to her house, I guess.
Absolutely not. Gauss meters for measuring magnetic fields. You need an AM radio dial down below 540. And you also need a Stetzer meter. I'll have that on my desk up front if you want to come later and take a look at it. But no on the Gauss meter.
I'm not going to answer all the questions. Some of them are very personal. Some have to do with healing practices, which we don't have the expertise in this up here to talk about. But there probably are people in the room that do know about healing and treatments who could talk about that. But I did want to bring up Ashley Portman to see if the folks who are online who've been watching this have made any comments or asked questions that she'd like to bring to our attention. Ashley, are you here?
Okay, what can I do in my town to bring more awareness to 5G? This is also a question I've received from a lot of people. People are wondering if there's a toolkit or anything. What would you suggest somebody do randomly across the country?
Do what we're doing. I've been interacting with groups all over the United States for several months now about 5G. And the reason why we decided to organize a coalition in southern Arizona, focusing on Pima County, but we're available to travel around southern Arizona, even up to Phoenix. In fact, we may be going to Phoenix in January to give a talk up there because they got wind of what we're up to. You know, all politics is local. If there's a problem, it can be solved by the people who are most affected with the people they elected to represent them. And so we need to start where we live, where we are, get together, share information. Our coalition has been meeting for about 3 months now, almost every week. And Ashley will tell you more about that in a minute. But we are creating a dialogue in the community. We've met with public officials. They know what we're doing. We invited them to this forum. And we're educating ourselves so we can educate others. That's how you do it. And there are so many groups forming around the country, testifying before their state legislatures, meeting with their local officials, helping to write protective wireless ordinances, staying within the rule of law, but trying to defend ourselves as much as we can while raising serious questions about what might be coming. That's how you do it. It's basic organizing.
Thank you. Eric, I believe this one would be for you. Are there any other plants that can mitigate radiation?
Other plans? Oh, yeah, well, any kind of a dense evergreen tree that doesn't lose its leaves. And, you know, cypress, firs. You want to get something where you can't see any light through it at all. It's pretty simple. Like a leafy evergreen tree, no. You want something that blocks out all the light. So it's a shield of water-filled needles that you can't see on the other side. Cypress, whatever.
We're reaching the 4 o'clock time, so we have to stay within our time frame. If you have any further questions, we're going to be around here. Eric would like to show all of his meters to you and how they work, and you can see the dials and ask a lot of questions about that. Dr. Paul will be here. Tim Sheckley will be here. Please come forward and let's continue the conversation. But thank you for coming. This is it for now. Ashley, excuse me, I have one more thing I forgot to mention. Ashley Portman did want to say something before you leave, before you go out the door. I'm sorry, Ashley.
No,
please.
it's okay. I just think I'm inspired to move back to Vermont where the whole place is densely forested with evergreens. So we, the Pima County 5G Awareness Coalition, are calling out and directly speaking to our public representatives, our city council members. We're asking you to lead a discussion in the merits of a community-owned fiber optic network to the premises for our homes and businesses, as well as having a discussion increasing protection for not only our health, but our security and our privacy. We have a petition that we have created, and I encourage everybody to sign it, that supports these initiatives. And if you're willing to make a donation for our coalition so we may continue to educate our community, we also have a crowdfunding campaign that we're about to launch. And if you sign up on an email list, we will send you the link, and we encourage you to circulate that so we can continue to do this work, not only in Pima County, but I think as well as the rest of Arizona that needs to hear about what 5G is all about. So thank you so much for being here. I think today we learned that, yes, we have some really dangerous implications of what 5G is, but we have some amazing alternative solutions, and that if we can build it up, that we might be able to shift this country into something much more safer and healthier for ourselves, and most importantly for the future life and well-being of this planet and our children. So thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.